If you are struggling with opposition instructions on Football Manager 2026, then this is the video that you've been looking for. In this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to know about opposition instructions and also share with you some tips that I normally use when I'm going about applying them. So for this video, I'm going to be using my Leeds United save because I think it's the only save that feels a bit relevant to what we're about to do. In case you're using a very top team, opposition instructions may not really be crucial as to how you win games. You can't dominate your opposition. But in case you're playing as Leeds United like I am now in the Premier League, we just recently got promoted after being relegated before, and we're currently sitting in 9th place and we've lost only 3 games. Our last 2 games against Forest and Everton, we've gone on to win those games comfortably without conceding a single goal. We've also gone 5 games on the spin, even drawing against Chelsea and also beating Bournemouth. So we've done really well in the league. So let's get into the opposition instructions because I feel that has helped us a lot in most of the results that we've had so far. So over to the tactics screen. Now if you go back to match day, another match day, there's obviously opposition instructions. You can get a glimpse as to see the system that I've been using. I'm playing a 4-2-3-1 system and a 4-1-4-1 DM system out of possession. So over to the opposition instruction screen, and the next game that we're having now is a game coming up against Arsenal in the Premier League. Now this is a tough game and it's a perfect example to show you how I go about thinking about position instructions. Arsenal are superior to us in every single position. In opposition instructions, there are 4 options we can choose from. All position instructions are divided into 4 categories. You have type marking, trigger press, tackling, and show on to weaker foot. The type marking instructions tell your player to stick to a particular player closely and stay on them all the time, making it harder for the opposition to have time on the ball and also making it easier for your player to close them down or trigger press them or tackle them and get the ball back from them. You have to be careful how you go about applying type marking. Type marking has 2 options that you can choose from. You could either choose to never type mark the player or you can choose to always type mark the player. You only want to mark players that have very high passing completion ratio. Usually they're going to be the central midfielders or the defensive midfielders. Martin Odegaard, Zubimendi are very good options, even Declan Rice. But you also want to be careful when you go over to those player attributes. Look, just go ahead and hover over the player like this. You can see Martin Odegaard, he's very good technically, very good mentally, but his pace is not quite there. He has pace of 13 and acceleration of 13. So he's the sort of player that if you go ahead and type mark, he may not be able to run past you. But you want to avoid players like Bukayo Saka. Bukayo Saka has acceleration 17 and pace 15. He's currently 27 in my game right now. He's an excellent player technically, mentally, but he's also a very superior player physically. You do not want to closely mark players that have faster than you. You do not want to closely mark players that have acceleration above 15. Let me just use 15 as an example. The pace and acceleration for Bukayo Saka is rapid, so marking him can cause your player to get dragged out of position or easily get beat on a 1v1 situation, making it harder for you to even defend against him. Another player that I sometimes mark, but this is not a textbook one, is the center half of the opposition. It's very rare for me to do this, but it's something I like to do when I'm stranded. You can go over to the center half defenders and look for the player that is very good on composure, very good on bravery. In fact, look for the best center back in the opposition and then put a sort of type marking on him. It may encourage the opposition's goalkeeper or the opponent basically to play the ball to the other center half, who is not so great. I don't think Saliba is the one. Saliba is probably not a very good player, to be honest, but that's just Arsenal for you. But if you go ahead and look at their center back and then you see a weaker center back, you want to type mark the opposition's stronger center back, allowing the weaker center back to be free for a trigger press. Speaking of the trigger press instruction tells your team to start pressing the moment that opposition player receives possession of the ball. Now we're looking at all these other players here. There's from the goalkeeper to the striker in Kai Havertz. Anybody that I go ahead and set a trigger press on, for example, team is going to begin pressing immediately that player receives possession of the ball. If the goalkeeper also play the ball to Julian Timber, it means that the moment Timber receives possession of the ball, the team is going to start pressing. Trigger press has 2 options that you can choose from. You can choose to either never trigger press a player or to always trigger press a player. Now you need to be careful how you go about doing this, because if you have trigger press on so many players, your team can easily get dragged out of position and get out of shape. So you do not want to lose your shape. You want to still somehow retain a shape. When it comes to trigger press, it also works in attack in the sense that if a player like Ethan Nwaneri, for example, or even Bukayo Saka goes on to receive possession of the ball, you want to set a trigger press on him because you know he's very good at shooting. Trigger press also doubles up as a closing down instruction. So if Bukayo Saka has a trigger press on him and he goes on to win possession, or the ball is played to Bukayo Saka, your fullback or anybody closer is going to get closer to Bukayo Saka and try to tackle him or try to press him and try to win the ball off him. That's very good in attacking scenarios because Bukayo Saka is very dangerous. You're going to want somebody to close him down, or at least 2 people to close him down. But you also want to be careful about how you do it. You have to watch the games, to be honest. If Saka beats your wing back or your central midfielder very easily, you want to take off the trigger press, knowing that it's not going to work anyway, and just find another way to go ahead and defend against him. Another interesting player you can trigger press is the defensive midfielder. In this sense, in case the team is a team that likes to play out from the back, like Arsenal, Zubimendi might be the defensive midfielder that comes to collect the ball from the goalkeeper. Putting a trigger press on him may mean that the moment the ball is played to Zubimendi, your team is going to go ahead and start pressing. That could help you recover possession, but remember that Arsenal, being a superior team to Leeds United, they may be able to play out from the back very easily. So having a trigger press like that set, and then you notice it's not working, they're beating or they're playing through you very easily, just go ahead and uncheck it and stay in your shape. For the center backs, I also spoke briefly about how you can trigger press one and then put the type marking on the other. But against this Arsenal team, it may not really apply here, to be honest, because it may just cause us more problems than good. But for the center backs, you can go ahead and trigger press one of the center backs and then force the team to start pressing when that center back receives possession, especially if it's a team that likes playing out from the back and that you know that you're a superior team to them and that you can force them and make mistakes on that press. We saw Manchester United do this against Arsenal recently, where they went on to press a specific player and then the other guy made a mistake, a huge mistake that Brian Mbeumo capitalized upon, which was very good to see, to be honest. Now, left backs and right backs are also players that you can trigger press. In Arsenal, for example, their wing backs are going to be players like fly forward all the time, so putting a trigger press on them is something that I would highly recommend, as this is going to allow your wingers in your team, your attacking wingers, to be a bit more defensive and be more responsible and try to mark these players and force them and track them back and then try to press them and get the ball off them. For the center forward, I don't really recommend having a trigger press on him. Somebody like Kai Havertz, for example, he's going to play as a false nine. He's not going to play as the advanced attacking forward, for example. So having a trigger press set on Kai Havertz may just cause your center back to be dragged out of position. So I would recommend just leaving that off and then just watching the game and see what happens. He's obviously going to be the kind of player that gets dragged out. But in case you have another center forward that may be more attacking as a center forward, and then maybe you have a back three, and then you can have somebody that can close this guy down, yes, of course, you can go ahead and apply a trigger press on him. But one more note on trigger press, I would not recommend having more than 2 or 3 trigger press players. In fact, I highly recommend you just use the trigger press on one player that you're specifically sure you can start the press when that player receives the ball. And then the other player could be a player that is in a attacking position. For example, you want to just always close him down. You can go ahead and apply a trigger press on him. The third option here is tackling, and for tackling there are 3 options that you can work with. And under tackling, you have normal tackling, easy tackling, and hard tackling. Normal tackling is more of the player deciding whether he wants to go for a sliding tackle or a standing tackle. Easy tackle is going to encourage your player to go for a standing tackle or just try to ease the player off the ball and get the ball back. Hard tackling is the full-on diving challenge, getting the ball back as hard as possible. For tackling, I like to look at the opposition's players' bravery. Now, for Arsenal's defenders, Arsenal probably have one of the bravest teams in the entire league. But if you look at Arsenal centre-backs, for example, they have bravery 15, and then that's Saliba. Gabriel has bravery of about 18. That's insane, really. So looking at this sort of players, you do not want to put a hard tackling on them or even any form of tackling, because they're not going to be faced by what you're about to do. Maybe easy tackles to try and just nick the ball off them, but I don't really know how that's going to work. But I do recommend that looking for players that have very low bravery. Those are the sort of players that you want to put hard tackling on, as they can easily get marked out of the game. They can easily be nullified in the game. So let me look at Ethan Nwaneri. His bravery is about 11, so he's the youngest player in the team. Bravery could obviously improve as he gets older, but he's currently 21. And if you want to, this is the sort of player that you're going to go for a hard tackle. You can have a very hard game just by putting this on him. As good as he is, his bravery is not very high, so having that hard tackle on him can just cause him to have a difficult game. Bukayo Saka as well, we've seen this in real life. You can go hard on Bukayo Saka. His bravery is about 12, and he's also slightly injury prone sometimes, so putting hard tackle on him can just have him be nullified from the game as well. It could do a lot of good for you. It may not be a very good day for Saka, but it could be a better day for you playing against him. Kai Havertz, on the other hand, is a centre forward, but as much as he has bravery 12, I don't really want to put hard tackling on him. That could cause a penalty or maybe cause somebody to get sent off. So maybe for Kai Havertz, you can go for either a normal tackle or an easy tackle, or just leave him as it is. For central midfielders that are very good on the ball, he tried to use the normal tackle. You can see that Martin Odegaard, of course, he has 10 bravery and his injury is also very thin. So just put hard tackling on Martin Odegaard. Then Declan Rice is going to be the much braver player. In case you want to go ahead and put a hard tackle on, I don't recommend putting a hard tackle on Declan Rice, but you could put a normal tackle on easy tackle. So knowing that your midfielders are technically gifted or technically suited to actually make the tackle, so they can go ahead and do an easy tackle or just try to nick the ball off him. Show on to weaker foot also has 3 options, and then you can either choose to show the player to the left foot, or show the player to the right foot, or show the player to the weaker foot. Show on to weaker foot here, I like to call that the pressing angle. What essentially happens is that your player is going to press in a way that forces the opponent to use a specific foot. In case I'm going to use Martin Odegaard for example. Odegaard is a very left-footed player, so if you go ahead and show Martin Odegaard to his right foot for example, your player is going to mark him and press him in a way that forces him to use his right foot and not his left foot. This can be a very good way to nullify players. The sad thing about Football Manager 2026 is that if you go over to a player like this, just hover over them, you will not really be able to see their other foot, the weakness or strength of their other foot. Martin Odegaard is very left-footed, but we don't know how good he is with his right. So if you go ahead and select Martin Odegaard for example, you can then see that his right foot is just reasonable, so you can go ahead and show him to his right foot. He may not be able to do much danger, but we're going to use another player here as an example in Kai Havertz. I know Kai Havertz may be able to be 2-footed. Let's just check. Okay, just the same as Odegaard, also reasonable. Miles Lewis Kelly, also reasonable. Declan Rice, also reasonable. Are you telling me that there's nobody that is 2-footed in Arsenal, the entire Arsenal team? Okay, a very good one here is Ethan Waneri. He's weak right foot, so showing him onto his right foot or his weaker foot may just benefit us a whole lot. Let's just put that in there. Right foot or weaker foot, anyone. You can choose, if you know the weaker foot, you can choose the weaker foot. If you're not sure what the weaker foot is, for example, maybe Martin Odegaard and all the other guys like Declan Rice, you can actually put weaker foot. Nigerian Timber, just the player I was looking for. I just have to congratulate Mikel Arteta for assembling a team that has players that are somewhat reasonable with their foot. So looking at Nigerian Timber for example, his left foot is fairly strong and his right foot is very strong. So when you go over to Nigerian Timber on the list, you do not want to put him on his weaker foot because it's not going to do much difference. He's also very good on his weak foot, so putting him on his weaker foot is not going to help you that much. So those kind of players, I just avoid them altogether. He is the player that I was looking for all this while. I'll be honest with you, I did wish that it was a much weaker team that we were going up against, or at least a team of the same level of quality, but because it's Arsenal, I think we've been able to cover a lot in this video. There's a lot that goes on to applying opposition instructions, but one very important thing you need to do is to actually go ahead and watch the matches and see what is happening. It may not always go in your favor, but sometimes it will, and that's going to be good for you. But remember that ignoring the opposition instructions sometimes may not always be the very best way to go. That is how I go about applying opposition instructions, and if you have any more questions, do let me know in the comment section about this. In case you want to know why your team is not pressing as often on Football Manager, I did make a video about that, and it has a lot to do with opposition instructions as well, so you can go ahead and check out that video next.